The courtroom in Boise, Idaho, was colder than usual on the morning of July 2nd, 2025. The air conditioning hummed faintly as families, reporters, and federal officials filled the wooden benches under high ceilings and fluorescent lights. There were no cameras, no live stream, no audio recordings, just a low murmur of whispered voices, the sound of rustling paper, and the heavy silence of grief that had lingered for over 2 years. At precisely 9 a.m., the courtroom doors opened. In walked Bryan Kohberger, the man whose name had become a symbol of terror since the brutal stabbings of 4 University of Idaho students on November 13, 2022. He was thinner than before, dressed in a pale yellow jail-issued shirt and pants, wrists shackled in front of him. He took slow steps toward the defense table. His face remained blank, as if carved from stone. No emotion, no regret, no fear. Seated behind were the shattered families of Calvez, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. For many, this was the first time they had seen him this close since the arrest on December 30th, 2022. Others had seen him only through plexiglass or on paper. Today, they sat mere feet from a man who had taken everything from them. At the front of the courtroom stood Judge Eliza Murray, presiding over what would become one of the most significant plea hearings in Idaho history. Kohberger was asked to stand. The judge spoke clearly, her tone flat but firm. Mr. Kohberger, you are charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. Do you understand the nature of these charges? Yes, he replied, his voice barely audible. Then came the words no one expected to hear just months earlier. I plead guilty. Gasps broke out from some corners of the courtroom. A mother sobbed. A brother stiffened. A father turned away. The guilty plea had not always been certain. For nearly 2 years, Kohberger had maintained his innocence. At his arraignment in 2023, he stood silent, triggering an automatic not guilty plea. The prosecution had filed to pursue the death penalty, citing multiple aggravating factors: the heinous nature of the crime, the number of victims, and the calculated planning that had gone into it. But behind closed doors, negotiations had been underway for months. On July 2nd, it was revealed that the defense and prosecution had reached a plea agreement. Kohberger would plead guilty in exchange for 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, and an additional 10 years for felony burglary. The death penalty, once sought as a definitive form of justice, would be taken off the table. For prosecutors, the decision was pragmatic. The case against Kohberger was strong but complex, with thousands of pieces of digital and forensic evidence. A full trial would have taken months, if not years, and put the families through every harrowing detail of the crime. A plea deal, they argued, ensured a swift and permanent punishment, and spared the families from reliving the horror on the witness stand. But the deal came at a cost. Seated in the front row, Steve and Christy Goncalves, Kaylee's parents, looked devastated. They had fought publicly for the death penalty, appearing in media interviews, and even lobbying state officials to keep capital punishment on the table. Christy later said, "He didn't give our daughter a chance. Why should he get one?" The judge began reading out the summary of facts, the official acknowledgement of what had happened. That Kohberger had stalked the victim's home for weeks before the attack. That on the night of November 13th, 2022, he entered the residence through the sliding glass door and used a large combat-style knife. That he killed Ethan Chapin and Xana Kernodle on the 2nd floor, then proceeded upstairs to kill Madison Mogen and Kaylee Goncalves. That he left behind a leather knife sheath, which contained his DNA, and that he attempted to cover his tracks by turning off his phone and cleaning his vehicle afterward. That he returned to the crime scene hours later, circling the neighborhood in his white Hyundai Elantra. As the facts were read aloud, Kohberger stood still, expressionless. He didn't blink. He didn't look at the families. When it came time for him to formally confirm the plea, the judge asked again, "Mr. Kohberger, is it your intention to plead guilty to these charges of your own free will, without coercion or promise beyond this agreement?" "Yes," he replied. The judge turned to the victims' families and said, "You will have your opportunity to speak at sentencing." The sentencing date was set for July 23rd, 2025. Kohberger will be moved immediately to a maximum security facility, where he would await formal sentencing and spend the rest of his life without ever being eligible for release. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered for reactions. Some families chose silence. Others, like the Chapins, released a written statement. This plea gives us finality. We don't have to look at him every day for the next 3 years. Our son Ethan can rest. We support this decision. But the Goncalves family spoke openly to reporters. We were blindsided. The prosecution told us this was the best outcome. But the best outcome for us would have been to see justice fully served, with a sentence that fits the crime. Public reaction was equally mixed. On social media, some praised the plea for saving the families more trauma. Others echoed Kaylee's parents, arguing that it robbed them of true justice. Legal experts debated the long-term implications. Had the prosecution blinked first, or had they made the wisest move in an already airtight case? For the people of Moscow, Idaho, this plea didn't bring closure, but it brought a turning point. The community had been gripped by fear and confusion in the weeks after the murders. Businesses shuttered early. Students transferred schools. Even now, years later, the fear still lingers. The home on King Road where the murders took place had been demolished in 2023. A grassy lot remains, empty but unforgettable. On its perimeter, someone placed 4 small white wooden crosses a day after Kohberger's plea was entered. Their names, written in black ink, Ethan, Xana, Maddie, and Kaylee. Inside the courtroom, Kohberger was escorted away after the hearing ended. He didn't look back. There was no apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement of what he had done. Just shackles, silence, and the weight of our lives he could never restore. And so, on July 2nd, 2025, Bryan Kohberger was declared guilty, not by a jury, not by a trial, but by his own words. For the families, the justice system had reached its legal conclusion. But for the victims, young, bright, full of life and potential, that justice came too late. And for the rest of the country, still haunted by the brutality of that November night, the case would remain a chilling reminder of how evil can wear the face of the ordinary